There has been a new law introduced by the beginning of 2022 that if you inherit a farm and not live there or not plan to live there, you either need to move there or sell it within 2 years of the inheritance. So that could force a few of the empty and now sadly rotten farms into the market. It's been a while now since the last farm search video. A lot of things have happened, but we're still on it. I'm not really sure when we last spoke about it, but I think it was February. And since then we have looked at 7 more farms. We've tried bidding on 2, but both were not successful. The last time we were speaking about a farm which was in the end sold for 2.6 million, quite far over our budget back then. But as time has passed now and we have been speaking to banks and family, we were able to up our budget to anything between 200 and 300,000 US dollars. This sadly doesn't mean anything in this country as it's still a very low purchase price, but at least it makes us somewhat more competitive. But here comes the fun part, which is probably somewhat international. The interest rates have been going up since February, and they did so quite drastic. If I'm not completely wrong, then we started somewhere around 2% in the beginning of the year. And now, the last time I checked, we were at 4.25% of interest rates. In the category of a $200,000 loan and maybe, let's say, an average of $400,000 or $500,000 loan in Norway, that makes a huge difference. So the housing market has taken a hit. Higher interest rates are obviously quite good for avoiding these insane and absurd bidding rounds that we had earlier this year, where houses were often getting sold for double or even triple the asking price. It's not all rosy though. Whenever we find something, then we eventually also have to pay this high interest rate. So the goal is still to keep the purchase price as low as possible. If you're not fully sure how it works to buy a cabin or a farm in Norway, then I suggest you watch this video first, so that you get an understanding of how the procedures are. If you already know, then we can now have a look at the 7 properties that we have been looking at between February and now. The first one was a bit special. It was a demolition object with 2 houses and 2 barns on 2 different plots. A total, I think, 40 acres, and the price was set to 50,000 US dollars. After all the frustrations of the past, we thought it could be a decent idea to just buy a plot, tear down what has to be torn down, and start building from scratch. Upon arrival, the feelings were a bit different though. The property was located in a valley which is pretty much not seeing any sunlight from October to May, and I know it gets pretty dark, so you want to have a look at the sun hours. Another thing was that there was a county road going behind the house in quite a distance though, and one in the bottom of the valley. The thing is there though that everything just vibrated upwards and it wasn't really too pleasant to be outside. As that was the only plot in this area that was for sale as a demolition object, we kinda turned the backs to the idea of building from scratch. The next 2 objects of the list of 7 farms were in an area that we don't really enjoy, but it's still doable for TR2 commute, so we had a look at them and realized that it doesn't seem like the right idea. There's just something about the house buying process where you enter a property and that's just not it. That left us with 4 more farms we had a closer look at. One was pretty close to where we are living right now, and the other one were about 1 hour driving plus a ferry away from here. The first farm looked very promising. I think it was priced at a 1.7 million kroner, which is 170,000 US dollars. There was a bit of a weird arrangement with the direct neighbors, but it's something you could kinda work around. The house was partially protected due to its age, so you have different regulations on how to replace windows and how to do the roofing, and you basically quite often have to go through an application at the commune before you can actually make the changes. But anyways, we were up for that. The barn looked very dry and quite well kept, and there was the second tiny house on the property which you could build out later on to a little cabin where people could stay. In total, that was a smaller property of about 15 acres, but it was something you could still deal with as it had great ocean view, so access to fishing, and the mountains right behind the house. But here comes the plot twist. As we arrived, I think about 15 minutes early to the official showing of the real estate agent, there were already about 30 cars parked around the house. Everything that is priced quite low on the real estate market here in Norway attracts a huge amount of interest, so it is in people's budget and they will come to have a look at it. And obviously 2 days after the showing, as the bidding begins, it didn't look so good anymore. We were willing to bid $270,000 for this property, as it would be perfect for Thea to commute, but that wasn't even enough. I found out later through some village gossip that there was a bit of a bidding war between the two neighboring farms that wanted to acquire that part and just annex it. So we got caught in that crossfire, and in the end it got sold for $290,000, which, let's assume you would have, I would say $150,000 in repairs, would bring you up to $440,000 for a 15-acre farm, which in my opinion is too much. That sale of this farm was pretty much aligned with the general peaking of the housing market in Norway, so it wasn't really surprising that people were just throwing money at everything. Well, we had 3 more unsuccessful options. 2 of them were quite close to each other in the same region, so we did the showing at the same day. At the first farm, we just asked for a private showing prior to the official showing date, because we would drive quite long. It would be nice to just lump it all together. So at this private preliminary showing, there were already 11 people looking at the farm. This one was located a bit higher in the mountains, I think priced at $290,000 and had about 86 acres of forest and usable land. For the first time, the house was actually in a pretty decent shape, and so was the barn and stubble. So you could basically buy it and move right in. Well, you could technically. In the evening, we got an SMS from the real estate agent that had forgotten to mention that around 500 meters from that property, there will be an establishment of a huge motorsport center. Just imagine yourself being on the search for a farm in the countryside with idyllic natural surroundings, and then somebody forgets to mention that there will be snow scooters and dirt bikes going in circles for pretty much all the parts of the year. We didn't even enter the bidding round for that farm, but to give you a heads up, it still got sold for $370,000, $80,000 over asking price. Well, 2 left on the list. The other farm we visited that day was just 10 minutes of driving away and very nicely located on a lake. Everything was calm and there were about 40 acres of land attached to the property. If I'm right on that one, there was about 20 acres of forest and 20 acres of farmland. But here comes the déjà vu. As we entered the showing of this property, there was about a queue of 30 cars of people that were already at the official visit. With this side, Thea didn't even really feel the urge to go and look at it farther, but we still went. And the farm was very, very torn down. You had some white mold in the main buildings, water leakages, and The water heating systems had to be renewed. Yeah, it just didn't look so rosy. Half of the barn was fallen in, half was somewhat restored, and the stubber you could basically just tip over and burn. Long story short, this one was close to be a demolition object. You could maybe save it with large amounts of restoration, but it's a maybe in that case. The asking price was $275,000, and with the status of all the buildings, we came there in the hope that it might be too much work for many people and that we could get it quite much below the asking price. Yeah, we were wrong with that one again, but nice hopes, you know. In the end, it got sold for $290,000. So imagine yourself buying that property and still having to put in $300,000 if you want to bring all the buildings that were once established on the farm back to life. Well, we don't have that much money, so that option was also gone. And then we came to the last farm, one that both me and Thea really enjoyed. The location on a lake peninsula and the very nice arrangement of the houses made you really much feel like home once you entered it. The ceiling height of the old house was also much higher than the standards of that time, and everything just felt pretty right. Until we spoke to the real estate agent. Looking at the farm cards in Norway, the property was listed at about 50 acres, mainly productive soil and a little bit of forest. But when we came there, we were informed that the sellers decided to split up that land from the property before the actual sale, and what we could buy was only the house with about 3,000 square meters instead of 50 acres. That for me really defeats the purpose of buying a farm when it doesn't have any land. So sadly, even though that one was a very nice option, we had to say no again. Even though the market has calmed down a bit through the higher interest rates, we still haven't been able to get our hands on a farm for a reasonable price. The interest in general for smaller, non-industrial sized farms has been enormous in this year, so we didn't really hit the best time to enter the market. The increase in our budget isn't really helping us much there, because most Norwegians are probably laughing quite hard at our numbers. I've also been speaking to the agricultural section in our commune, as in this area where we live, there are a lot of empty farms that are just not getting sold. And there has been a new law introduced by the beginning of 2022 that if you inherit a farm and not live there or not plan to live there, you either need to move there or sell it within 2 years of the inheritance. So that could force a few of the empty and now sadly rotten farms into the market. The first effect of that we will earliest see in 2024 though, so it's still quite a long time that I don't want to necessarily spend renting. I'm not sure if it is the same on the countryside all over the globe, but some of the old landowners here own several farms, like up to 3-4 farms, of which they only use one, and keep the others just in case or just because they like the land. And these people are often in an age where they're very hard to speak to. So even though I have been finding 2 farms that are empty here and tried to get into contact with the owner or people that know the owner, we get basically a response of 0. So the commune was helpful, but it doesn't really work with old and stubborn landowners. So we also placed a few flyers within supermarkets to just keep it the very old school paper way, just mentioning that we are on the farm search, and it would be nice if somebody could give us a hint if something is supposed to go onto the market. Because as soon as it gets public here, it is pretty much completely lost in terms of buying for a low price. There are two potential options that are coming later on this year. I won't speak too much about it because I always feel like I'm jinxing it, but let's see if I need to make a third one of these farm search updates, or if it will be a "we finally found our farm" video.